Hello everyone, it is Mental Health Awareness Week here at SGTV, and we have got Lucas from Andy's Man Club joining us on the show, and we're going to be talking about no right or wrong way of dealing with mental health. And this is quite a wide, broad subject, this, but I thought it's a good one to touch on because we've spoken in other episodes about how there's nothing that's any more or less significant to yourself about trauma and mental health and that kind of thing. So I wanted to get your view on this subject.
Yeah, I think, do you know what, it's broad, it's a little bit vague, but it's also really simple. There is no right or wrong way of dealing with mental health. I think that what you've got now is loads of people saying that therapy is brilliant, or meditation's brilliant, sport's brilliant, exercise is brilliant, cognitive behavioural therapy is brilliant, you know, whatever it is. Everybody's saying that all these things are fantastic. What it is about finding the right things for your toolbox, for your own personal toolbox to actually deal with these problems. And, you know, it can be a combination of things, and, you know, what works for some people doesn't work for others. You know, like I know people who've been for like acupuncture, for example, and that's really helped them deal with their mental health. Whereas other people, you know, walk along the canal, that'll be what'll help them deal with it, you know. And it's about finding those different things and basically trying and seeing what works for you, what leaves you feeling more fulfilled than others. You know, it might be something completely different. It might be, you know, board games, or I don't know. There's so much out there that can enrich you, that can make you feel better and can give you that sense of sort of passion, that sense of belonging, and also that, you know, that sense of enjoyment, you know, or maybe even distraction from whatever it is you're going through. But there is no set way at all of dealing with your mental health.
Do you think there's almost been like a clear divide in generations on how people have dealt with it? Because I'd like to think, especially now, it's not where we want it to be, because we know from the stats that men's mental health in general, it's not where it should be.
Yep.
But I'd like to think it's come a long way from where it was to 100%. Previous generations.
Yeah.
But do you think there is that sort of clear divide of what people did then to what people do now?
Yeah, definitely, because I think that people before didn't deal with it, they just ignored it, you know, and I think that's the thing, you know, you sort of, like mental health and suicide were two very, very shameful topics to talk about, I think, you know, in the not too distant past. You know, you look at how society approaches mental health and suicide. I mean, up until 1967, I believe it was, or until the mid-1960s, if you were to attempt suicide and you were to fail, you'd be locked up. You'd be treated with a custodial sentence, a short custodial sentence, and that is where the phrase committed suicide comes from. So you'll never ever hear us or anybody sort of within this sphere using the phrase committed suicide anymore, because it refers to committing a crime. So we'll always refer to it in a different way, but that just shows you the attitude that people had. The attitude were completely wrong. You know, I think it were up until the 1990s, people who died as a result of the mental health, or people who died by suicide, weren't allowed to be buried in certain churchyards. And again, that was to do with the shame aspect. And I think that mental health and suicide were treated with such a massive degree of shame up until probably the last 10, 15 years. I think a big turning point for me were when Gary Speed passed away, ex-footballer. It was around 2010, 2011.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, and I think that for me were when people actually sat up and took notice, when everyone thought, hang on, this guy is the manager of the Wales national football team. He's almost the record holder for Premier League appearances. You know, beautiful wife, beautiful kids, lovely house and everything, you know. How has this happened? That's when people start to sit up and take notice, and I think that we have seen a massive generational shift, and I think the beautiful thing to see there is some of those people who've been brought up with those old-fashioned ideals and old-fashioned, you know, mentalities, their perceptions changed, and it can have changed for two reasons. One reason could be they've sort of got with the times a little bit, you know, and they've sort of just reflected and thought, you know, maybe there is something to this. Or ultimately life has dealt them a bad hand and they've had to deal with something, and, you know, that changes, you know, perspectives happen for them. But what we're fighting against really with this stigma, and what we're fighting against with mental health and, you know, with all these issues, is stigma that has existed since day dot, since the very start of mankind. You know, people have had issues with their mental health, people have had issues when it comes to suicide, and I think, you know, we are getting better at dealing with it, but when you're dealing with not just hundreds of years of stigma, you're literally dealing with thousands of years of stigma. To make the progress that we've probably made in the last 20, 25 years as a society is absolutely huge.
Why do you think there ever was a stigma? Because let's go back thousands of years, for example. You're in your own little tribe or community. Someone's injured themselves or they're ill. You'd imagine everyone's going to rally around and right. We need to help this person because they're part of the group. We need everyone fit and able to carry on to survive. So why do you think it was any different for people that were suffering mentally rather than physically? And why is that just?
Because it's easier to understand the physical ailment than it is a mental one. I think that's what I think. It's that. Yeah, I think it's that. I think the other aspects of it. I think I think religion plays a part as well, but we won't get into that. But I think, to be honest, you see. You still now, nobody knows what's going on in other people's heads. I think someone breaks a leg, obviously, you know very obviously what's wrong with that person. But these people who, when depression, when anxiety, when all these things weren't actually diagnosed conditions, when there weren't more of a grip on how people felt, how people thought, I think that it were a lack of understanding, and probably a chronic lack of understanding, that meant that this stigma developed, because people, generally speaking, can be quite afraid of what they don't understand. So that's why I think that a lot of people with these with mental health issues were sort of pushed to one side and hidden, and were viewed shamefully. It's why people with depression and anxiety and PTSD, up until sort of again the 1940s, 50s, they were sent to asylums. People were treated with electroconvulsive therapy and all sorts of stuff, because these were people who, we didn't understand, who, shouldn't be seen by anybody else. And they were sort of just locked away, and it's horrendous. But we've come on leaps and bounds in a really short space of time, which is brilliant, which just shows, if we were having this conversation 10, 20 years down the line, then, but hopefully there'd been even more progress. But we'll only see real progress when the suicide numbers in this country decrease. And at the minute they're increasing. They've increased since the financial crash in the late 2000s. And it's, it looks like it's only going one way. Hopefully we see a reduction, but people are under that much pressure that mental health, is an issue that a lot of people are suffering from. Mental health issues, loads of people are suffering from them. But that's why groups like us are around to try and basically support people as best we can.
It's such a tricky one because, stress at the end of the day, it's your body's way of telling you you're in a situation you shouldn't be in, isn't it? And like you say, it's the way we live now as a society. It's so fast-paced, it's so intense, it's so overwhelming. And it's not easy to just say, well, I shouldn't be paying bills or having to go to work or all these things. That would be great if we didn't have to do that, but it's not the reality. And the reality is managing what you can do. And there's no right or wrong way of doing that. But it might be something as simple as opening up to a friend, colouring, like we spoke about some of these coping mechanisms, doing some colouring in, doing some painting or poetry. Whatever that is, it's got to help, isn't it? Yeah,
you've got to just keep trying. You've got to keep trying different things, trying different coping mechanisms, and not give up. That's what it is. I think I've said before when I've been on this podcast, I've lost 3 friends to suicide. And they were all very, very sociable people. They were all, people who I'd love to have had a conversation with, if I'd have had any clue, that they were going through what they were going through to the extent that they were, then I'd have done anything to help. And they didn't give up. They fought until the very end, but they fought their demons alone. And ultimately, when you fight your demons alone, they can overwhelm you. They really can. And that's why it's so important that people reach out for support, lean on other people. there's a reason that, you know, there's a saying which is the problem shared is a problem halved. That saying's there for a reason. Share your problems, talk about them, and try and access that support if you can.
What you said about people want to help, it couldn't be any less true. It's absolute, because I know from experience and friends and people that have really suffered, like people that have taken their lives. Often people will say, you know, how selfish, they weren't thinking of they didn't consider anyone. But the people that have come close to that I've spoken to, they've said, everyone else just goes, you're in this dark tunnel.
Yeah.
You know, you almost feel like a burden that you don't even want to consider them. Like you're so stuck in a hole that everything else is just noise. And like you say, just that's not the case for the people around you. They don't want you to suffer. They don't want to be without you. No matter what the situation is, there's always a way out, isn't there? There's always a way to help someone, or just to come out of that.
Yeah, that's it. Live in the present. Look at those people who are around you, and, you know, try and access that help as best you can. And like you say, there's so many people that are out there that are willing to help, that are, you know, not just on the end of a phone, but face to face as well. Are willing to help, and whatever situation you're in, you can get out of it. You can definitely get out of it. You know, you look at, there's people who've gone on to do great things in their life who've had no real success, or no real, you know, who've had a struggle up until the 50s or the 60s. You know, there's people who've only just started accessing therapy and counselling now. So my point is, it's never too late, like, to try and turn things around. It's not, and it's important that people do it. It really is. They say that with a suicide, there's a ripple effect of about 160 people. So when somebody dies by suicide, that's how many people it affects, because it's not just your immediate friends or your immediate family. It's their immediate friends and family, their work colleagues, you know, the people at the NHS who they go to access therapy after, or whatever. But that is how many people each suicide individually affects, roughly, which is mind-blowing. So it's why it just shows you straight away why it's not worth it. It's, you know, your life's worth so much. And to anybody who's struggling, even if you're not struggling to that extent, I'll clarify, Andy's Man Club, it's not just for people who are at the brink. You know, it is for people who are going through a bad situation at work, who've had a bad day, or who just want to see what it's like. But if you're considering going, or if you think you need some help, reach out to us, reach out to anybody, try and access some support, and keep on trying as well. Keep living your life, taking every day as it comes, and if you can access some support, then do it.
Lucas, it's been a pleasure to have you joining us.
Yeah.
Really appreciate you coming down and opening up and talking about everything that you've experienced, and the support that Andy's Man Club offers. It's an amazing service, and as you said, it's free.
Yep.
There's no judgment. Anyone can go. And you told me before that it's not like a certain kind of person that is going to Andy's Man Club. You've literally got
everyone,
any man from all walks of life, shape, size, background, whatever. They're all going, and then they're all benefiting from that, aren't they?
Yeah, they are, definitely, and it's a wide range of people. The one thing you'll find, no matter which one you go to, is relatability. You'll find somebody who you relate to in one way, shape or form.
Yeah. We've done quite a few episodes featuring Lucas from Andy's Man Club in this little series, so please keep an eye out on the channel for those videos. And as always, please remember to like, subscribe, hit the notification button below, and we'll see you in the next video.